Hi everyone, I am Rochelle and I would like to talk with you for a little while with this story time of mine. I am going to talk about losing to the system and is it a generational curse? Let me first explain what a generational curse means. An author by the name of Hank Hanegraaff states, a generational curse is believed to be passed down from one generation to another due to rebellion against God. Our families have the greatest influence on our development, including the development of our patterns of sin. Some people even assert that family or generational curses are passed down along generational lines. This belief comes from Old Testament passages which say that God punishes the children and their children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. That's in Exodus chapter 34 verse 7. You see, we inherit many traits and biases from our parents that aren't always a positive influence on ourselves or others. Here is my story. Over the years, I've learned a lot about my mother. She grew up amongst 8 siblings. My grandmother also had a set of twins who died at birth. My mother was the 3rd youngest child. She always felt lost, unloved, and forgotten. This made growing up difficult. While a child, she was misbehaving, some things all children do. But this time it was different. Her father, my grandfather, came home from a long day's work very tired. He took off his shoes and reclined in his favorite chair. My mother, who was very excited to see her father, tried so desperately to grasp his attention, even if it was for a little while. Over and over, he asked her to stop misbehaving and let him rest. Like most children, she kept at it. Well, back in those days, it was common for folks to whip their children, a trait learned during slavery. So my grandfather stood up, slid off his belt, and gave my mother a good whooping. While she cried, he sat back down in his favorite chair and silently passed away. All throughout her young life, she was blamed for killing Daddy and taunted by her siblings. This plagued my mother throughout her life. She began to act out, and later it was discovered that she was pregnant. Well, my grandmother, who I loved dearly, didn't take too kindly to that. She hit my mother upside the head with a cast iron pan. She was only a teen. My mother's pregnancy was a difficult one, as you can imagine. She was in and out of the hospital and finally gave birth to a set of twin girls, my sister and I. Life was much harder after our birth, and back then, parents didn't help much in order to teach their children a lesson in these situations. Not long after giving birth to us, she burst her stitches from having a cesarean birth by bending over cleaning my great-grand-aunt's tub. Yes, this was her punishment, and chores must go on. It was a traumatic time. She spent the majority of the first few months away from us in the hospital. My mother's mental stability began to unravel. And nearing 3 years, she gave birth to another set of twins. This time, a boy and a girl, my brother and sister. The stress was just too much. She was in and out of the hospital for what we now call bipolar disorder. Back then, It was called manic depression. This caused my mother, I believe, to become very abusive. Don't get me wrong, my mother was very loving, affectionate, kind, and protective of us. No one, and I mean no one, could do any wrong because my mother was right there and she was on it. But she was affected by that generational curse. For every small thing, we were whipped very badly, even though we were very young. The abuse continued, and all 4 of us were placed in the foster care system. The depression consumed our mother, and she committed suicide at 26 years of age. We were devastated. No matter what, children always love their mother. I still love, miss, and cry for my mother. So growing up was hard. We lived with family, but no one cares for you and love you like your mother. We were divided in twos. My twin and I bounced around between 2 aunts, my brother and sister, to their father and grandmother. They were lucky. Not long after that pesky old generational curse spewed its ugly head once again. The abuse continued for about 3 years, and guess what? I too became a teenage mother. Boy, did I have a rough pregnancy, suffering with severe hyperemesis. I lived in the hospital too. I said that I would never whip my children. That was a lie. My 2 oldest were taken away from me at the age of 25, a year or 2 older than when my mother lost custody of us. I was devastated, and that big brain and pseudo lawyer I became kicked in. I thought that I knew everything because I was book smart. Just graduated with an associate's degree and was on my way to my bachelor's degree. The court system doesn't take too kindly on mothers like me. So my attorney, legal aid attorney, told me. I knew the system better than the social workers. The judge at one time reprimanded them because they were not up to par. I found my own psychiatrist and parenting class. I received a parenting certificate before court. The agency just refused to help or send me to someone that could. So I did the research in between studying for classes and maintaining full-time employment. On the first appearance in family court, the social worker had the nerve to tell the judge that I did not take parenting class or participate in therapy. Boy, did her mouth drop when I handed the certificate to my legal aid attorney and receipts for therapy, not once but twice a week. The judge asked why didn't the Child Protective Agency know or even provide assistance to me. That social worker, she mentioned that they were planning on doing so after the court date. The judge was furious. He ripped them a new one and still sided with them, giving them time to get their shit together. I was devastated once again. But I continued to do what I needed to do. I loved and missed my children. I even received another parenting certificate. And there, I also went to therapy again. One that they wanted me to go to. because the psychiatrist I had evaluated me and found that it was just a one-time occurrence, and she saw no problem with me having my children back. Well, they didn't like that, so the judge handling my case was terminated. I never heard of so many postponed court dates in my life. If it was any other employer, we'd be fired after the first no call, no show, or for incompetency. As payback, the Child Protective Agency made me pay for my own transportation out of the city in which I lived, and cost about $22 or more round trip per person every week. I had to pay for others traveling with me because they wanted to visit my children, and after all, it was my fault why they were there. After about 2 years, and my children had a hard time in the system, I listened to a social worker of my kind, if you know what I mean. They removed the 2 incompetent witches from my case after I complained to the mayor, writing to the judge, Oprah, Ricky Lake, and all the news outlets. It was a good thing having a corporate job. If you are wondering, Ricky Lake sent me a postcard. Oprah didn't want to touch such a controversial topic. The news wanted me in front of the camera and not incognito, as I did work with heavy hitters in corporate America. It wasn't possible. Because of it, that only station that wanted to do the story decided against it. I never saw my daughter until about 10 to 11 years later. My son returned home with much difficulty after 2 years. Life happened, and I gave birth to a set of twins, twin boys. The only set of twin boys in the family. We have many twins in the family. Can you believe that? Well, we moved south and life was better for a time. But as they got older, I whipped them too. Even after all I put my oldest children through. They are too old for whippings now. So I just take away the things they love the most. iPads, iPhones, Galaxy S10 Plus cell phones, PlayStation, cable, and freedom every once in a while. Those generational curses are brutal. Or is it more like you learn what you live? That expression, you take after your mother or you act just like your father, can be true. Is life perfect today? No, it isn't. But it's sure better than yesterday. Am I still a firecracker? I'm very proactive despite my health, and I am now back in school. Let's break the cycle by any means necessary. Divide and conquer. Society wins by breaking up families. It makes families weak and feeble. Let's stand together and each one teach one. Unity, we stand. Divided, we fall. Just so you know, my child had a welt from a belt, a single welt on the thigh from moving when I swung the belt that one time. Love on your children. You never know when you'll see them again. I am Rochelle, and Rochelle 200 on YouTube, Rochelle on Facebook, and I Sweet P, the letter P, on Instagram, and Pammy Be Good on Twitter. Thank you all for letting me tell my truth. If you would like, you can contribute at my Cash App is Jerry's Daughter, GerysDaughther. My PayPal, RochelleRochelle200@gmail.com. Thank you once again. Peace, love, and light.